My wife's work brother gave her a gift that exposed their affair. Now they're both jobless and she's homeless. Hey folks, I could really use some advice about something going on in my marriage. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I've been married to my wife, she's 30, for 7 years now. We also have a little girl who just turned 5. Depending on who you ask, some people think we tied the knot a bit too early. Trust me, I heard that opinion more times than I could count while we were planning our wedding. But here's the thing, we've known each other since the later part of high school, and by the time I proposed, I genuinely felt like we had spent enough time growing and learning together to make that decision. We were both pretty level-headed for our age back then. She had her sights set on medical school early on, and I was already determined to build a business of my own. That shared ambition, that drive, that's part of what made me feel like we were made for each other. My HVAC business was already up and running before I hit 20, and it was doing really well. So, when the time came for her to start med school, I had the financial stability to support her through it. If you had asked our younger selves where we'd be more than a decade later, I think we both would have been proud, at least when it comes to our careers. But lately, some things have happened that make me wonder if there were signs I missed. Maybe red flags I brushed off. Or maybe, people just do what they want, no matter how much love or effort you put into the relationship. I've always done right by my wife. We've basically grown up side by side, so I thought I knew her inside and out. But I won't ramble, let me try to get to the point. As I said, she made it through medical school and now she's a general practitioner. Honestly, I've never been prouder of anyone in my life. I watched her graduate high school, then earn her degree, and then do it all over again for med school. I'll admit, there were times I worried I'd feel like I wasn't enough next to someone so accomplished, but I'd built a great life too. I didn't go to college, but that was a deliberate choice. I knew it wasn't the path for me. Instead of spending 4 years in a classroom, I poured myself into new ventures, like starting a car detailing business. And the grind paid off. I make good money and I'm proud of what I've built. No regrets about skipping college. None at all. Now, being a doctor means my wife works long hours at the hospital, and just like any job, she has her share of work friends and people she doesn't exactly click with. Pretty standard stuff, whether you work in retail or tech or anything else. But something started to feel off when one name kept popping up in conversation more than anyone else's. Let's call him Devin. You ever hear of that whole work husband nonsense? That's the vibe I started getting from the way she talked about this guy. If anything happened at work, she'd somehow end up at lunch with Devin. If she was nervous about walking to her car late at night, guess who was there to play knight in shining armor? Yep, Devin again. Then came the point where she wouldn't stop laughing and gushing about his 2 cats and his chihuahua. Apparently, he couldn't stop showing her pictures of them. At that point, I started raising an eyebrow. I mean, what man wouldn't get a little suspicious? Devin seemed to always be nearby. So one day, I tried to play it cool and joke around, even though I had a hidden motive. I asked her if Devin even knew she was married. She kind of paused for a second, then smiled and said yeah, he knows, and reassured me not to worry. Told me he's like a brother to her. Now, let me tell you something, I absolutely hate that phrase. Like a brother to me. Ugh. But I didn't push it then. At the time, I didn't have anything solid, just a name that kept popping up way too often. Now, before I get into what happened next, I should give a little background about the sexual side of our marriage. I've never been the kind of guy who needs to be getting busy 5 times a week or anything. Not once or twice every couple weeks was enough to keep me satisfied. And in the beginning, that rhythm actually worked out great for both of us. She's not someone with a super high libido either, so in the early years, our sex life felt perfectly balanced. But then, out of the blue, she just seemed to lose interest altogether. We talked about it, and she chalked it up to hormones, stress, bad weather, her diet, upcoming exams, you name it. We tried different things to fix it, but nothing changed. And to be honest, I never held it against her. I tried to be understanding. But even with my modest needs, after a while it started to wear on me. There were moments I actually thought about stepping outside the marriage, but I never let it get past the thought. I never came close to doing anything. And then something strange happened. One day, she came home all excited, talking about how she wanted to reignite our sex life. Now, by this point, it had been close to 2 years, and I'd bet good money that we hadn't been intimate more than 5 times during that stretch. So yeah, her sudden burst of enthusiasm definitely caught me off guard. Naturally, I asked what sparked the change, because honestly, sex is never something she brings up unless I mention it first. She told me she'd had a discussion at work about sex, and it got her thinking about new things we could try to spice things up. Now, maybe I'm just a little paranoid, but something about that didn't sit right with me. Sure, I get that doctors probably talk about all kinds of things that would make the average person blush, but I'd never gotten the sense that she and her coworkers were chatting openly about sex. So I asked her who exactly she had these talks with. I mean, I know the names of most of her co-workers. She said it was Devon, and some of the others. But that vague little phrase, the others, bugged me. I felt a knot in my stomach. It really sounded to me like this was a personal conversation with Devon. And if my wife had been discussing our sex life, one-on-one, with him, that felt like a serious line being crossed. Alright, no problem, I'm listening, I told her, trying to keep an open mind. So, she went on explaining how this workplace conversation started off about how important sex is in a marriage, then drifted into the territory of sexless relationships, and eventually ended up on the topic of sex toys. Then she said something that really threw me off. She mentioned that she used us as an example during the conversation. I mean, I've never been bitter about the lack of sex in our marriage, but let's be real, it's been tough. So hearing that she brought our personal business into a group discussion with her co-workers, some of whom I actually know pretty well, really didn't sit right with me. Thing is, my wife has always been a private person. That's why it just didn't add up. So I tried to catch her off guard. I said, "So it was just you and Devon then, right?" I was hoping to see her reaction before she had time to think. She looked stunned for a second, caught off balance. But then she quickly shook her head. No, it was me and a few others. Devon was just there too. I locked eyes with her, trying to read her face, but her eyes kept shifting away like they were looking for an escape. There was this long, awkward silence, probably about 5 seconds, before I finally said, "Tell the truth." She didn't say anything, just stared down at her lap. I saw a tear slide off her cheek and hit her pants. "It was just you and Devon, wasn't it?" I pressed. I'll admit, I wasn't usually this pushy, but all those little stories about Devon had been piling up, and I guess they finally brought out a side of me I didn't expect. Looking back, I'm glad I pushed her when I did. Otherwise, I probably would have just kept overthinking it for hours and torturing myself with doubt. She let out this tiny, broken yes. "Alright then, go ahead, keep going," I said, trying to stay calm. But she didn't say anything. She just sat there, quiet as a mouse. The air between us was thick with tension, and I could feel the anger boiling up in me, but I did my best to stay composed. After a couple minutes of silence, she finally spoke up. "I'm sorry I lied. I knew it would look bad to admit I talked to him about something like that alone." She looked up at me, but I kept my face hard and unreadable. "I swear, it was just a conversation. That's all it was." I looked her right in the eyes and said, "I don't think you did anything physical unless you two are sneaking off to the janitor's closet at work. But I hate the fact that you're sharing our personal life with other people. And out of everyone, you chose to share it with Devon? Really?" I added. "So it's Devon, the guy who suddenly has so many deep talks with you, who helps you get over the sex drought we've been in for years? You do realize how that sounds, right?" She wiped her eyes and started up again. "He's like a brother to me, and I hate that you don't believe that. There's nothing romantic or inappropriate going on. It's just like talking to a friend or even like a therapist." And that's when I realized I was literally trembling. My hands were shaking with how mad I was. I could see it so clearly. She was slowly trying to flip the script. Suddenly, she was becoming the victim. She's done that in other arguments before, but never with something that cut this deep. So I cut her off before she could spin it any further. "You know what? Go ahead. Keep having your little heart-to-hearts with your brother Devon. I'm actually curious to see what your unofficial sex therapist brings to our bedroom next." And with that, I stood up and walked out. Slept on the couch that night. Now let's fast forward about a week. The couple days right after that argument were awkward, no surprise there. But eventually, we moved past it, or so I thought. She didn't bring up Devon again, which honestly worked for me. I knew they still had to see each other at work, but as long as I wasn't hearing about him nonstop, I could deal. For a moment, I figured maybe things were leveling out. Maybe things were heading back to normal. That feeling lasted until just yesterday, exactly a week after the big fight. She came home late that night holding a plastic shopping bag, and I could tell there was a long, narrow box inside. She looked nervous, trying really hard to act normal, but it wasn't fooling me. We danced around small talk for about half an hour, and I could feel myself getting more and more impatient. Eventually, she came and sat next to me in that way she does when she wants to have a serious talk. "So, babe, remember how we talked about spicing things up in the bedroom?" she started. I nodded. "Well, I decided to take a leap and buy something I thought might help us, or help me, I guess. Since I know I'm the one with the issue." Then she reached into the bag and pulled out the box. Let me tell you, there was nothing discreet about this packaging. Clear as day, it was a dildo. A big one. Bright purple, and the graphics on the box made it obvious it had a vibrating feature. Now, I'm not one of those guys who's against toys in the bedroom. If anything, I think they can help more than hurt when they're used tastefully, of course. But my wife has always been on the more conservative side when it came to stuff like that, so seeing her go this route kind of threw me. Then again, she did say that conversation with Devon opened her mind a bit, which just sent my thoughts spiraling back to that night. She slowly took the thing out of the box like it was some delicate piece of crystal. I just stared at it. I'd never needed anything like that in past relationships, never had complaints, but I know everybody's different. Maybe she needed something more to feel into it again. I didn't want to make things more awkward, so I just tried to lighten the mood a bit. I said, "Why do they make him so colorful?" She actually looked relieved that I said something, like she'd been holding her breath. And then she said the part that made my blood run cold. I remember every word. I know, right? I don't know why Devon chose this color, something more natural looking would have been nicer. She smiled, still holding the stupid thing in her hands, just staring at it. Meanwhile, I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. It was like she didn't even realize what she had just admitted. In that moment, I didn't know if I wanted to explode or just sit quietly and let what she'd said settle in, because clearly, she didn't even realize the bomb she had just dropped. But staying quiet wasn't really an option. I felt like my head was about to burst. "Devon bought you a dildo?" I said it way louder than I meant to, it just came flying out. She looked confused at first, like she couldn't figure out why I was reacting so strongly. Then I saw it, her eyes widened as it clicked for her. She must have mentally replayed what she'd just said and realized exactly what she'd let slip. I stood up and shook my head again and again, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. How does someone you keep calling your brother end up talking about sex with you this deeply and then buying you a toy? It was just too much to wrap my head around. She said something I couldn't catch, so I asked her calmly, but firmly, to say it again. I was hoping there'd be some reasonable explanation, some wild misunderstanding. But no. What she said was, I was going to buy one for us anyway, so it saved us some cash. And she whispered it, like she already knew how stupid it sounded. I didn't even bother replying. At that point, she had entered the phase of the argument where she was just saying whatever she could to justify her actions, no matter how flimsy it came out. Honestly, I don't think I've felt lower in years than I did right then. I had so much rage and hurt built up, but there was no acceptable way to let it out. I wanted to grill her about Devon, push her for every detail, but I knew that in the state I was in, she'd just stonewall or twist it around. And with how mad I was shaking, it wasn't going to be a productive conversation anyway. So, I did the only thing that made sense. I grabbed my car keys and my wallet and walked out. She lightly reached for my arm, maybe to stop me, but I shot her a look and she backed off immediately. I ended up just driving around for hours, cruising through the night trying to calm down. Eventually, I checked into a hotel for the night. In fact, I stayed again the next night too. I'm still not sure if I'm going home tomorrow. But I figured while I'm out here, I might as well put this whole story out to all of you, see what advice or thoughts you might have. Because in my gut, I feel like something more is going on between her and Devon, but I want to have proof. Something rock solid. Not just suspicion. Edit, you don't have to convince me there's something going on. I'm not in denial. I just want undeniable evidence, something concrete. It'll help me in more ways than one. Edit 2, yeah, I probably should have kicked her out of the house instead of leaving myself. But honestly, I couldn't stand being around her, not even long enough for her to pack a suitcase. So I figured it was better to remove myself. Edit 3, a few of you mentioned checking her phone, and I'm planning on doing that, but it can't be right away. She's still on edge, and I'd rather wait until her guard is down. A lot of your comments gave me ideas, though, and I think the better move is to reach out to a couple of her coworkers that I'm friendly with. It could backfire if they're loyal to her, but it's worth a shot. Update. Hey everyone, it's been a little while, but I've got an update. I had to play the long game here, so I hope you've all been patient. Now, I know updates are great for everyone else following along, but for me? This one's tough. It's bittersweet, to say the least. So, after about a week away, I went back home. My wife apologized over and over, said she'd start putting distance between herself and Devon. I didn't say much, just nodded. Was I over it? Not at all. But I knew that if I wanted to get to the bottom of things, I had to be home, had to play it cool, and pretend things were getting better. It took a while for us to even act halfway normal again. Once that tension started to fade, I made a risky move. I reached out to two of her coworkers. Folks I figured might not snitch on me. One was a guy I'll call Rob, and the other was a woman I'll call Anna. I started with Rob. I figured he might relate to me as another guy and maybe level with me. We weren't close or anything, and I didn't have his number, but LinkedIn came through for me. Sent him a message explaining who I was and how we knew each other, and we arranged to meet up for drinks at a bar. Now, I didn't just jump in and start throwing accusations. I eased into it. I told him I'd been feeling off about Devon, and asked what he'd noticed between him and my wife. Rob sat quiet for a moment, like he was weighing how much to say. Eventually, he told me that she and Devon were very close. He didn't have anything solid, no physical proof, but he agreed it felt like something was going on just based on how they acted. He even admitted he'd noticed it himself. I thanked him for his honesty and moved on to Anna next. Now, talking to Anna was a bigger gamble. Women tend to be more tuned in to gossip at work, but that's also what made this conversation risky. I figured if my wife didn't like Anna and she's complained about her plenty, it might work in my favor. Maybe Anna didn't like her either. We met up the next day in a public spot. She was actually a pretty woman, which probably explains some of the tension my wife had with her, probably just that competitive vibe some women have toward each other. When I asked Anna about my wife and Devon, she gave me this look, one of those I hate to be the one to say this expressions. Then she said, I don't know how much you already know, but there's definitely something happening between them. She went on to say that people at the hospital had been talking. The buzz going around was that the two of them had been hooking up at work, and she couldn't think of a nicer way to say it. As soon as I heard that, my stomach dropped. Yeah, I was furious, but I also felt something close to relief. Like, finally I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being paranoid. I was right. I thanked Anna more than once and headed home. That night, while my wife was fast asleep, I took her phone and went straight to her messages. When she said it, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to blow up right then and there or just sit with the fact that she didn't realize the absolute bomb she just dropped. Either way, staying calm wasn't really an option. My brain was buzzing, my heart pounding. I could feel the pressure in my head rising. Devon bought you the dildo? It flew out of my mouth louder than I intended. She looked completely thrown off, first confused, then wide-eyed with panic. I watched her face as she replayed what she said, and when the realization hit, her eyes went even wider. I stood up, shaking my head over and over, trying to find the words that made sense. How does a guy you constantly describe as like a brother end up having intimate conversations with you, and buying you sex toys? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. She mumbled something I couldn't catch, so I asked her to repeat it, calmly, despite the storm inside me. I was hoping there was a misunderstanding. But nope. She whispered, I was going to buy one for us anyway, so it saved us some cash. Yeah. That's what she said. And she whispered it because even she knew how ridiculous it sounded. I didn't even respond. She was already deep in the excuse-making phase, throwing out whatever came to mind to justify something that was, in no uncertain terms, completely out of line. That moment? That was the lowest I'd felt in years. I was burning up inside, but there was no way to release it without doing something I'd regret. I wanted answers, wanted to rip every last detail about Devon out of her, but I knew she'd just deny and deflect, especially with how worked up I was. So I did the only thing I could do to protect myself. I grabbed my keys, grabbed my wallet, and walked out the door. She tried to stop me, gently reaching for my arm, but I shot her a look that made her freeze. I drove around aimlessly for hours, just trying to calm down. Eventually, I checked into a hotel for the night. I even booked another night after that. I wasn't sure if I'd be going home anytime soon, but I figured I'd bring this to you all and see what you think. Deep down, I had a strong feeling she and Devon were more than just work buddies, but I needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. Update. Hey again, everyone. It's been a while, but here's the follow-up you've been waiting for. While this might be a compelling twist for you, it's been nothing short of heartbreaking for me. But it also gave me closure I desperately needed. About a week after everything, I went back home. My wife apologized over and over. Said she'd dial things back with Devon. I didn't say much, just nodded along. I wasn't over it, not even close. But I knew if I wanted the truth, I had to be close to her, keep things smooth on the surface. It took some time, but eventually, we got back to acting somewhat normal. Once things calmed down, I made a calculated move. I reached out to two of her coworkers who knew me, ones I thought were least likely to run back to her with anything I said. One was a guy, let's call him Rob. The other was a woman I'll refer to as Anna. I started with Rob. Thought maybe he'd have some guy-to-guy loyalty and give me the honest truth. Didn't have his number, and obviously couldn't just show up at the hospital. But shout out to LinkedIn, it helped me find him quickly. I messaged him, reminded him who I was, and we agreed to meet at a bar. I didn't jump right into it. I eased into the topic, told him Devon had been bothering me for a while, and asked if he'd noticed anything. Rob hesitated at first. I could tell he was weighing how much he wanted to get involved. But eventually, he admitted that my wife and Devon were very close, borderline inseparable. He didn't have any direct evidence that they were sleeping together, but even as a bystander, he said the vibe between them had made him suspicious more than once. I thanked him, then set up a meeting with Anna the next day. Now, Anna's the kind of woman my wife has complained about a lot. Probably just that competitive energy women sometimes have with each other. That made me think maybe Anna didn't like her either, which could work to my advantage. We met in a public place, and when I brought up my wife and Devon, Anna just sighed. Her face said it all before she even opened her mouth. I don't know what you already know, she said, but yeah, there's something going on. Everyone at work pretty much knows about it. From what I've heard, they've been messing around. At work, even. When she said it, I was furious, but I also felt strangely relieved. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. My gut had been right all along. I thanked Anna, went home that night, waited until my wife fell asleep, and finally grabbed her phone. Her chat with Devon wasn't hard to find. I scrolled for what felt like forever, but weirdly, everything looked clean. Too clean, honestly. No mention of the toy. No flirty banter. Just surface-level stuff. I even checked her email and the app she used most. Still nothing. For a second, I thought maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I jumped to conclusions. That was before I opened her gallery. At first glance, it was just boring, normal stuff: selfies, food pics, photos of the sky during her commute. Nothing out of the ordinary. I even started to feel guilty, like I judged her too harshly. Then, just on a whim, I opened the trash folder. And there it was. A literal sex tape. Deleted just a few days ago. My wife, still in her scrubs, bent over and being pounded from behind by a guy in similar work attire. The room looked like part of a hospital, sterile, clinical, and very much inappropriate. So yeah, I had my answer. Their little work romance wasn't just flirty texts and awkward energy. They were literally having sex at work. I had to sit there and watch 5 full minutes of my wife being intimate with someone else. And as awful as it was, I needed to see it. Because I had really hoped that I'd find nothing. That we could move on. But that's just a dream for someone who wants to live in ignorance. And that's never been me. I saved the video to my phone, cleaned up any signs that I'd touched hers, and stayed up that night planning my next move. The next morning, she left for work like it was any other day. I acted normal, told her goodbye like usual. As soon as the door shut, I grabbed 3 suitcases and started packing her things. We've been together a long time, so there was no way I could get everything, but I made sure the essentials were neatly packed and lined them up by the door. Then I got on my laptop and wrote a long, detailed email to her hospital. I laid out my concerns about employees having sex on the premises, touched on professionalism, ethics, and hygiene concerns. I've run businesses for years, so I knew how to word it to get attention. I thought about sending the video to her family, but thankfully, I caught myself before going that far. That would have been over the line. Still, I decided they deserved to know what kind of person their brilliant daughter really was. That night, she came home smiling until she saw the suitcases. I don't regret it. I couldn't help myself, I said, surprise. Her smile vanished, and panic set in immediately. What's going on? She asked. I just stared at her. What do you think is going on? All she could manage was, what did I do? You know what you did. You're leaving. You can come back for the rest of your stuff another time. But not tonight. She was speechless. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. I had no patience for the waterworks. Go to Devon's. I'm sure his bed's cozy. You're probably more used to sleeping with him at work anyway. She broke down crying, but I didn't care. I picked up 2 of the suitcases and took them to her car. Came back, saw her still standing there bawling, grabbed the last one, and handed it off. She was outside the doorway now, so I shut the door behind her. No grand goodbye, just a click. It took her almost 30 minutes to drive off. But she did. She didn't need to know how I found out. The look in my eyes told her everything. Not long after, I got a reply from the hospital. Both Devon and my soon-to-be ex-wife had been terminated. Cited for violations of medical ethics and professionalism. 1 move. 2 careers. Done. Now I'm working with a fantastic divorce attorney who said it was very smart to save the evidence, even if it hurt like hell. I also created a family group chat, added all her relatives, told them what I found out about their golden girl, and left the chat. That's it, folks. She'll be my ex-wife soon enough. And as painful as it is to know I spent years with someone who turned out to be so careless with our life together, I'm glad I found out now, before wasting more time. Thanks to every one of you who read my first post and stuck around for this mess. Take care of yourselves. I know I'll be doing my best to do exactly that.